Welcome to A Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach with Mark Gellard and Candy Reed, sponsored by the ERT 300. Well, hello and a very warm welcome again to Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach, and a man that I've tried to be getting on to the podcast for quite some time. His name is Justin Sherring. He was the boyhood coach of Jack Draper, the current coach of Joe Salisbury, a former coach of Johanna Konta, and many, many more. He's a bit of a legend in Surrey, the county of Surrey, and also in Great Britain. Welcome, Justin, to the podcast.
Hey, Candy. It's a real pleasure to be here. Sorry, it's been such a tough task to get me on, but I'm here now and looking forward to talking to you. Yeah.
Only the best, Justin, take an awful long time to get onto the podcast. So I don't blame you at all. But thank you very much for your time. Now, of course, we work together a little bit as part of Coaches of Surrey Tennis, which dominates the Great British landscape. And I think for the first time, we just won the double at under 18. So you must be a very, very proud man.
Well, I mean, what a great experience. And, you captaining the girls. I mean, it's such a fantastic experience, and you well supported by Anna Bedbrook and, former sort of Anna Hawkins, former professional tennis player. Our captain's a brilliant John O'Ward, Ben Cullen. I mean, I suppose the easy part of doing that job is knowing that the teams they're in really good hands. I suppose the tough part is trawling through, some a little bit occasionally sort of, mediocre coaching fraternity to find the real diamonds. And I'm really glad that the Surrey players get to only work with the very best. And that's what happens in Surrey. So, it's likely that they're going to do well because they're surrounded by brilliant people.
We also have exceptional players, it must be said. And of course, you're leading the charge. I think that's why I like doing this podcast so much, because I'm obviously coming at it as a commentator and a broadcaster, but also a coach. And I'm fascinated by great coaching, of which I would say you are right up there. Why did you start coaching? What inspires you every day to continue?
Well, it's a really good question, because I've had an amazing day today. I'm in La Manga, and I've literally just said goodbye and goodnight to a colleague who's in the hotel room just along the corridor, and I just said thank you,
I need
John.
to know about that.
Well, yeah, I just said thank you, John. I just had one of the best days of the year, and my year's been pretty amazing. I didn't go to Australia. I wanted to go to. Joe was quite happy with the way I select my tournaments by picking places that I haven't been to before. So he knows that hopefully wherever he takes me, I'm gonna do my best. But going to Doha, Dubai, and then Indian Wells, which is like a second home to me. But today we're out on the clay, in La Manga, Spain, and for a lot of, I was asked today, even by one of the teachers from the school that we're helping, they said, don't you find it a little bit boring, being out here after you've been on the tour? And I said, do you know what? I don't, because when you get into it and you sort of feel the energy coming back that you're putting out there, it's really, really sweet and really, really rewarding. And you talk about having coached for a long time. If I knew I was going to have this much sort of satisfaction as a 16-year-old, riding my motorbike around Lanzarote, which is what I did when I first started coaching expats, children, how to coach tennis. And now almost, I'm going to be 55 this year. So we're not a million miles off sort of coaching 40 years, being around coaching. And days like today, I absolutely love it. And I can't wait. I can't wait for tomorrow, and I can't wait for the next day. I can't wait for the French Open when I get out there again, coaching. So I think I'm discovering that whatever you put out there, you kind of tend to get back. And once it bounces back at you, it's a pretty good vibe. It's a pretty good way to live, Candy. And seeing you guys win the under-18 County Cup for Surrey last weekend, that was another massive buzz. And it's just, coaching just gives you one buzz after the next. And to know that they feel good, parents feel good, the whole team feels good. I mean, why not? What a great way to live.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. So you started coaching at 16, you're now almost 55.
Yeah.
I imagine you've learned an awful lot over that time, probably how to coach, the most efficient way to coach, how to get the best out of your players. You see someone who perhaps is sulking or a little moody, you can change their demeanor, all those things. Is there something that really pops out at you that you think you've learned the most?
You probably learn how not to coach.
Yes.
You probably learn that putting you got to be, you get a lot more measured, and you listen a lot more. And I think a long time ago, and I think that it isn't the fault of coaching courses, but coaching courses give you knowledge, and they give you this content that you feel obliged to then deliver when you're getting paid. And then over time, if you can be bothered, or you've gone on a journey, or you're deeply involved in helping a player, supporting a player, you start to realize that it's not just about all that content that you were delivered by someone else who had to felt that they had to deliver to you in order to deliver their course, in order to sort of fulfill a requirement. So coaching isn't about fulfilling a requirement, and the less formal you can make it. I noticed that even when I'm out, when I am on the tour, I notice that I look at the relationships and I see the successful ones, and I see off the court are people that are getting along with people, getting along, and getting along with people means that it's not all about you. It's not all, you've got to listen, you've got to care, you've got to be there for somebody, but then you've also got to, kick their butt and sort of, squeeze them and take players where they don't want to go. And there's a real feel for it, which I suppose early on in my coaching career, I felt like I had a feel for people and a feel for energy. And sometimes I'd get it right, and sometimes I'd get it wrong. And then I'd feel a bit of an imposter by not sort of delivering more formal coaching, and more or less sort of winging it a little bit, not always being planned, not always preparing everything, and just being able to live and be in the moment. And the more and more I've seen the success that that players have had, and they've come back to me when they get a little bit older, and I get a bit older, they always say, I liked the way that you did this, I liked your passion, I liked I've had the pleasure and privilege of being around Jack Draper for a long time, and with his success at Indian Wells, it's literally, it felt like watching one of my own children achieve a childhood dream, and just be able to be there in the box and to support Jack, and to be there and watch as a tennis fan, but to see someone achieving their dreams. And then you realize that it's not about you, it's not about your dreams, it's about helping other people that are more able than you are, to do their business. So it's a magical world, a great existence, and I'm privileged. And I was sitting at dinner with David O'Hare, great coaching colleague of mine. We both helped Joe Salisbury, and he said to me, "What's your greatest moment ever in coaching?" And we did sit there for a minute, and I said, when Joe won the Australian Open 2019, I think it was, and it's taking what you thought was a little bit of a dream and a little bit of a, something that you thought might happen, but until it really happens, you're like, you can't really believe it. You can't believe that somebody that you were involved with and you knew since they were 5, you're seeing the pure joy on their face. And I realized it was nothing about me at all. I just enjoyed watching him go about his business and get so much pleasure from it. So let's not get caught up in who's the best coach and who can do this and who can do that. It's, if you're privileged enough to be part of people making their own dreams come true, how about that? How about that?
Absolutely. There can be nothing better than that. And for most of us, we'll never experience what that is like to help somebody to major glory. You've done that with Joe on 4 different occasions, haven't you? Because 3 times back to back to back, he was a US Open champion. Just describe the feeling when you get a player who wins something like that. And then, like you said, you're not working one-on-one with Jack Draper, but you coached him for 10 years when he was a young boy. You've also coached Johanna Konta, and she reached the top 10 as well. You're arguably one of Britain's most successful coaches. The numbers just tell us what that is like. Why do you think you have the gift, perhaps, when others don't?
Because I tend not to worry too much in latter years. I tend not to worry about what I don't know. And I think one of the things that baffles me, and it's a wonderful thing about coaching, is that if you try and be someone that you're not, players know.
Yeah.
And I think players really know that they need people around they can trust. So there's enough times where I haven't worked with a player because I just don't think I can help them, or it's not the right time, or I'm not in the right headspace, and I just, that doesn't feel right. And I do think, working with Jack and Joe for such a long time, and knowing them as children, I think that maybe my capacity to contribute probably quite a lot. And I don't want to underplay it because I'm being shy, or not sure about my own capabilities, but I think you probably do have quite a big impact on children when
Massive.
they're growing up. And the way that I go about my business as a human being is that, look, we're not here for very long. I'm a big picture guy, and we're not here for very long. And let's make the most of every moment. And if we're playing tennis, then by golly, let's fight for every point. Let's be the best that we can possibly be. And you know, and I have chats with Jack, and he's very, very grateful. And I find it more from an educational perspective rather than oh wow, I've helped him, but more from a learning. Like when he sort of says, if I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, your passion, your hunger, your like determination, your fight, and I it kind of it's in me. So and when I see him fighting and competing hard, then I think, well, I mean, I didn't mess around when he was younger. And if the biggest problem someone's got, if they come to me and say they want to be good, you're gonna have to be good because you just told me. You just told me. So I don't want to fail you. I'm here for you, and I don't want to fail you. If Joe's dream was to be number one and win Grand Slams, then by golly, when I'm in the ring with him, then I'll make sure that he, punches hard and, fights like a dog. And my guys, I've got to say my guys, because they're like tennis kids to me. My guys fight like crazy. My guys know how to dig deep. My guys know it's not all about forehands and backhands. They know it's about character and heart and determination. So, look, I'm of the Rocky generation. I grew up on Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just about 5. I think we'll leave it after that. But certainly, 1 through 4, if you want to know about coaching, you watch your Rocky movies, and that's sat in my soul, and I've sort of passed it on, and I try and teach it to other young coaches that want to get involved. It's about what's in the heart. I say skills pay the bills, but heart sets you apart.
That's great. I like that.
And I think I made it up as a joke one day and thought I actually believe that. So let's stick with it.
If you ever do the Justin Sherring biopic, that could be kind of the last thing that comes up, couldn't it? The big graphic, the big ending.
Exactly.
Do you think, though, if you find somebody, a young boy or a young girl growing up in the county of Surrey, and you see they've got natural talent, they've got a love for it, can you spot someone? Do they stick out like a sore thumb from the others?
Yeah, they do. And because they focus. They focus. They have a not taught focus. They engage with the ball, engage with the game, and they are emotionally connected to the game. They're emotionally connected to the outcome of each shot. And we always talk about emotions like that's a bad thing, but they feel the game. It's in their heart, if you like, and they like need it. They like need it. And I just I'm just working with a guy right now. He's one of the best boys in the UK, and he's emerging tennis Europe. And I've just started working with him, and I really like him. And I just say, I really think I can help. I really think I can help you because we're on the same page. And the further you are away from being on the same page with someone, obviously the tougher it can be. And look, I know there are going to be matchups in the world of tennis where coaches and players come together and they're on the same page. I mean, they're going to probably get there quicker than us. So when you meet someone and you're into it, they're into it.
Yeah.
It's like let's get it done. Let's go after it. And yeah, I've been, I work with a few guys, but I don't want to, say their names right now, but I work with a few guys over the years, and it's been an instant click. And for whatever reason, the relationship might not go on too much further, maybe because they need to travel, and I'm committed to Joe and my program back at Weybridge and Surrey Tennis. But if you get that click and it works for a few months, 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, then you get some good work done. You really do. And it doesn't need to be heartache and heartbreak when you finish things and they moved on. It just might be just a lifestyle difference. But I like that. Yeah, I can definitely sense that connection when someone's into it, really into it. And I think the other thing, Candy, is they need to be a good person. I'm not interested in working with someone that will win at all costs and will cheat and get dirty and be quite rude. But this thing about they're very good, but they're not very polite, or they're not very respectful, or they're not very grateful. Then I'm not really your guy, because when tennis is finished, what sort of person are you going to be? I'm so proud. I'm proud of Jack, and I'm proud of Jack, the way he talks, the way he respects his opponents, the way he's got such a big heart, and Joe's exactly the same. And they're good people. And if you're going to be around, spend a lot of time working with people, nice if they're good people, right?
Much better. And the amount of time that you're with that player, particularly when you're a tour coach. But I think the formative coaches like you, we probably don't speak about them enough. We always speak about the big names that have perhaps taken their player on at 20, 25 and made them perhaps into major champions. But we don't really talk about the formative coaches. And that is the important time, isn't it? When you get that person early on, you teach them the right technique, the love for the game, how to compete, all those things.
Well, I think it is. And I think that if psychology, and, we live in a world now where, if anything's sort of, troubling you as an adult, then everyone feeds it back to your childhood. So, if we're going to talk about it in a negative context, then when things go right, it's probably only fair that you talk about things positively as well. The impact that you can have early doors, and the pleasure that I get in, sitting with Jack after Indian Wells, and literally sitting with him, spends a lot of time, Doha, and a little bit of Dubai, but he decided to take Dubai off so he could focus on Indian Wells. That's a pretty good idea for his body. But the pleasure I get in telling these boys just how proud I am of how they've grown, how they've developed, and how nice they are, etc. But how blooming hard they try. How hard they try. Our sport is brutal. Everyone will tell you that. Everyone that really knows, the day in, day out, the grind it's I'm in awe. And I tell Joe a lot when I'm with Joe. I tell him, I just said, mate, the shift that you put in, the work that you put in, it's awe inspiring. And players don't realize that they really inspire the coaches to keep finding ways to make them better. And a coach needs to go to bed like they feel like they've contributed to growth. And I'm certainly one of those coaches, and I'd be the first to take myself out of an environment where I thought, I'm not really making a difference here.
Yeah.
Unless you can make a difference, then get out of there. Don't do it for any other reason. Just, because you're not doing yourself any favors, not doing the player any favors. It's a bit of an ugly one. So doing things for the right reason and getting that growth and improvement is so valuable. And, sitting with James Trotman, who I admire so much. He's such an amazing coach. And Jack's so lucky. He is a lucky boy to have James in his corner. He's so kind, and he's so heartfelt, and he's so warm, and he's so genuine, and he so values Jack as a person. And to sit with him, through some big matches at Indian Wells and feel that, and I don't really have a right to say this, but I felt like, thank you, James. Thank you for looking after my guy. Thank you for looking after my tennis boy, because you care for him as much as I cared for him. And I think someone like Jack really feels that. He's a big heart person, and he, people that care about him, he'll really value that, and he'll work hard for you. He'll die on a tennis court for you. He'll give you everything. So, yeah, it's a very special time, Candy.
It's a funny one with James Trotman because I grew up playing with him. He was, I think, a year younger or two than me. Played a lot at Bisham Abbey, and he wasn't somebody you'd necessarily point out as a future great coach, but he certainly has become it, and an awfully nice guy as well. You're absolutely right. I remember speaking just into Craig Tyser, former coach of Ash Barty, and I remember hearing actually Darren Cahill on Caroline Garcia's podcast, and both of them said that good coaches should almost coach themselves out of a job. They should make their players self-reliant. And it seems like you have that philosophy too. Is that right?
100%, 100%. I mean, I tell players, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to guide you. There's a lot of guidance, because eventually, people need to understand this when they come from other sports. You send someone out to war on their own, and if they're lacking in certain attributes, it's probably not because they don't know those things to do. It's because they haven't had enough freedom to own them as their own. And if they're always continually looking at the box, I mean, this is what I find interesting about how the sport's going to evolve, because the more you can coach, the more you can get involved in a match, then it changes the dynamic of the whole coaching relationship and the whole way that you produce a player. Because we used to produce players to be totally self-reliant. And that is part of it's funny because it's part of the junior setup, is that you're coaching players and they're so ridiculously reliant on you. I remember once as a young coach, we were playing at the Solihull International up in the Midlands, and I had two players in the final. I think it was Joe and a young girl that I worked with called Laura Slater, and they were both playing at the same time, the final, and I was like, what am I going to do? Because I was quite into. I saw junior coaching as coaching juniors as a, it's not really it's not proper Wimbledon and stuff. You're not gonna. It's really, I need to better coach you during the match, because it's important. Because if we can coach you during the match and you can learn things in the match, it's better than going back to base and trying to figure it out later.
Yeah.
So I found there was like a hedge that allowed me contact with both the players, and they could both hear me. And I remember I found this lovely hedge, and there was court supervisors around. No one knew I was there. And I was coaching the players and helping them and supporting them, and probably saying, aim for the backhand a bit more, or play the short ball a little bit wide, keep trying. And then at one point, I said something a little bit too quiet. And Joe said, what did you say, Justin? And three court supervisors and a court full of parents all looked over to this hole in the hedge where I was a little bit hidden. And before I knew it, there was a supervisor at the back, so I couldn't get out. And I put my hands up and just went, it's a fair cop. It's a fair cop. I'm sorry. And I walked out. So
in disgrace.
I'm quite glad that coaching has become, acceptable now, part of the rules, as long as you sit in the right chairs, which isn't always good, because sitting at the Melbourne a couple of years ago, the hottest day of the year, like 43 degrees, and the coaching seats are right in the sun. But the other end of the stadium, the coaching seats are in the shade. And Dave and I and the physio happened to get to the court a little bit late. So we ran on thinking, no. We looked down and we saw the Polish team sitting down, and we were like, oh no. And we literally sat there and were roasted. We had wet towels around us. We were asking, I felt like we had to have those ball kids to put the ice around us. We were really dripping. So you're sending them out to battle, and bit by bit you pass the baton on, don't you?
Yeah.
You pass the baton. I mean, you've got a lot of information to try and get across, and it's a two-way, and then eventually you're sort of saying, right, get out there. I trust you. Be accountable for your own, for your own work. And yeah, I'll be here if you need me. But but really it's down to you now. Let's see what we've managed to do together.
So let's now focus on Jack Draper. I have to say, I saw his brother Ben Draper, who we both know is a very good player in his own right now, an agent, last year. And we were discussing Jack, and I said, it's not going to be long before Jack's a top 10 player. And he said, well, I hope you're right. And you could almost see it with Jack that was going to happen. I mean, I was right, and I'm sure that many others were right about him. When he was younger, how much did you see of the potential in him? And can you believe he's now a top 10 player?
The answer is yes and yes, without question. Without question. I talk to Richard Plews sometimes, national coach at the time. We both, working with Jack and Richard on the LTA side. And Richard always says to me, but just you always knew this. You always said this. And I would always say, this guy's going to be great. He's going to be a superstar. He's going to be amazing. He's got such an ability to fight. And when I coached him, he was probably the smallest of the group. So for someone to fight so hard on any surface, he didn't grow up on the clay, plays great on the clay. He's just a fighter no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. All the stuff that we used to do was so competitive. He got the best from me because I could still, play pretty well. He wouldn't beat me for a very, very long time, and everything was so ferociously competitive. And, we'd set up, he'd turn up sometimes and, I'd set up a mini red court with sponge balls and say, right, best of 5 sets. And Ben swears that this is why, Jack's got such sort of good tactical awareness and good feel and touch. He said the games he used to play, I used to play in the boxes with him for 2 hours, anything in the box, anything goes. I was pretty strong, fit. You're not going to beat me. So I could take him right to the edge of victory and then snatch it away from him. We'd play loads of loads of 21 out of the hand, loads of 21 lung busting, not sort of short points. It was all long, tough, strong, hard, heavy points. And then loser, I'd say, right, the loser does what? Jumps over the fence, runs across the field, runs across the next field, touches the top of the crossbar of the football pitch and runs back, and then we go again. Yeah, no problem. But Jack was always that guy that said, when you finish the session, he'd say, please, can we play one more point?
Yes.
He's a one more point guy. So I think it's possible for coaches to leave your player hanging. Leave him hanging. I didn't let him win anything. There's still one game he hasn't beaten me at. And if he's watching, I want to, if he thinks he's ready for me, it's slice only from the back of the court. No volleys, first to 21. It's an absolute lung buster. So I'm not surprised that he can cover the court. I know he does lots of work, but I'm not surprised that he can cover the court as well as he does, because I used to push him around quite a lot.
It's interesting you say that, because I have, I coached a few youngsters, and one of them gets particularly upset if you beat him. So we always make sure we lose. But it sounds like actually I should be beating him and putting him in his place so that he wants more, and we'll see the real little boy. But I think the worry is, as a coach, that you're going to put that person off competing forever, because they say, well, I lost, I can't do it again. But maybe that's the right thing, that they don't come back if they're not ready for that competitive spirit.
They're not ready, yeah. And you got to coach it, and just sometimes we would literally sort of wind each other up a little bit. And I go, oh, we're going to cry. What are you going to do? You're going to cry about it, and because it's a little bit of banter, like, because it's my rockiness against his rockiness. Like, what would Rocky do? What would Rocky do? If you want to play more, okay, I'll give you 5 more minutes. See if you can win. Okay, fine. All right. Okay. So, and it was different with someone like Joe, coaching him when he was younger. This guy was a lot more introvertedly, competitive. Jack was absolutely chewing his chain as he walked in, like, let's have it. Just, do you think you can take me today? And I was like, oh, come on then, big dog, let's have it. Joe a lot quieter. Joe a lot, you get him to compete and run around. And I used to have to play little games with him. And the wonderful thing about competing with Joe, and don't worry about that, you don't win 6 Grand Slams. You don't win 6 Grand Slams without being a ferocious competitor. And he was one of the best boys in Europe. And the last 8 of the Orange Bowl 14. He's a very good player, but it was chocolate caramel biscuits. So we would play a game, and we noticed that if we put a chocolate caramel biscuit on the line,
okay,
Joe would dive. Joe would dive for points. He'd chase himself around the court. So, literally it became a bit of a serious thing. Like, his mum, Carolyn, would say, "Oh my God, I forgot the chocolate biscuits. Can you pick some up on the way?" And I'd be like, "Don't worry, I've got us covered." So, and
always
I
have a
believe that,
supply.
I know, and I believe that, and I remember reading the Andre Agassi book, and he told a little story about Steffi Graf used to be extrinsically motivated, and Steffi's dad used to play her for cupcakes.
Yeah,
I don't know if you knew that, but the cupcakes. So, for as long as you need it, you've got to use every little tool in the book.
yeah.
And then once their heart sort of latches onto it, and once they really get into it, the penny drops, and bingo, there you go. You've got a competitor for life. But, Jack came from a very competitive family, older brother, dad's ferocious, mum's wonderful competitor, grandparents, it runs through their veins. Tennis runs through their veins. And I suppose so it was ideal. I'm a very, very, very lucky coach to have come across two brilliant boys, and spend so much time with them. And I'm still young enough to get to see them have success. So brilliant.
With Jack Draper obviously winning Indian Wells, the biggest title of his career, beat some massive players, didn't he, en route? And you said you were there to watch that. What did you?
I was there. I watched every
Yeah.
match. I watched every match. The Brooksby match I watched on television while sort of having lunch in the restaurant there, but I watched every other match live, and they were all different matches, all different, they all required him to concentrate. They all required him to commit to his game style, and that's listening not only my own observations, but listening to James Trotman, and also chatting to Jack a little bit afterwards, and I do ask him sort of how it went and what does he think, and he's nice enough to share that with me, which is great. And it's about, certainly when he played Shelton, I mean, you've got two guys that can just do so much damage, and they sort of mirror each other. But honestly, I think as big as Shelton's serve is, I think that Jack's a smarter server. I think he uses the short wide one to great effect, and I think that Jack's better off both wings. I think Shelton has an absolutely enormous forehand. Jack's got a very big forehand as well, but I just think that ultimately Jack's backhand is such a strong shot, and it's always been a strong shot. Being that having got that sort of Rafa right-handedness, the right hand being at the top of the handle gives him such great control over the racket head. And you watch him, he can take it early, he can drive it deep, he can chuck it up, he can hit an angle, you want to come in on it, you're going to be in trouble. So I think ultimately Jack was able to stay competitive and fight for longer than Ben Shelton, Holger, and definitely Carlos in that third set. Carlos had a lot of momentum, but I think guys are going to realize that when Jack comes out and he's on it, he's 6'4", and he's a 6'4" killing machine. He's a real warrior. He's a real fighter, and he doesn't come out sort of smiling and, yeah, I've got this. There's just a real steeliness in his eyes. I don't know if you've noticed that, but when he's on it, he is so locked in. And I think
how much of that, and you saw that as a young boy. And what about the technique of the strokes? Did you teach him pretty much everything he knew? I know his mum was a tennis coach. His father was head of the LTA, wasn't he, for ages? So he had tennis, like you said, in his blood. But was the technical stuff your stuff?
Yeah, we did everything. I mean, I did some coach education the other day, and I'm drawing up all these videos. And I mean, I'd love to share it with you sometime, but the videos of him with the forehand at 7 is just so similar to the forehand at 13, 14, so similar to the forehand that he's using now with little, and that's with someone that grew so quickly at 16, grew, from sort of 5'8", I would imagine, to, he's about 5'8", wasn't he? He was a tiny bit bigger than me, which is not many of the players I coach are just a tiny bit bigger than me at 16. They've normally gone early. Certainly Ben Draper, his brother, was a lot taller than me. but, you know, they suddenly grew so quickly between sort of 16, 18, 19, you know, to this monster 6'4". So, you know, inevitably you're going to get adjustments and coordinational, but, you know, but the shots we put in place were thoroughly thought out. And I've got, you know, hours of sort of footage and of trying to get things right with him to give him the best possible chance. And, you know, anyone that says this is how you hit a forehand, this is how you hit a backhand is obviously talking nonsense, because it all depends on who's in front of you and how the body accepts the rhythm and timing of a certain swing. And there is not like there's not like something you can trace and just copy over and say, right, if you do this, it's going to work. It's a lot suck it and see what timing feels right. I mean, you know, the Fonseca forehand, I mean, everyone can try and copy that all you like. But if you can tell me what's going on in his body physiologically, you know, the way the weight transfers just at the right moment. I mean, whoever's taught that I would imagine, has had quite a holistic view of timing and rhythm and momentum and body weight transfer just at the right moment. And for me, as a big sort of boxing fan and martial arts fan, there are people who can just knock you out. There are people who try forever to increase their punching power, and they just can't do it. They just don't have the timing. You know, most people, if they tried to hit the ball like Ben Shelton does on his serve or his forehand, they'd break. Their body would just break. It's not designed to do that. So there's something inside you innately, but then if you go after the right stuff, like, you know, hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball clean, I mean, tell me that's not, how can you even do anything in tennis now, men's tennis, if you don't hit the ball hard, hit the ball clean? You're joking. If you don't hit the ball hard, stay home, stay in school, do something else. You got to hit it hard.
And you've got to move like a Olympian, don't you? Essentially, the movement is outrageous now.
I mean, for Jack to move like he does at 6'4", and, you know, he's not the lightest, glidiest, effortless, sinnerest, you know, mover, Sampras. You know, he's not that kind of gliding around the court. He's had, you know, he's a hustler and a bustler, and he's a grafter, but he's a really good example of where there's a blooming will, there's a blooming way, you know?
Yeah.
If he wants to get to that ball, and if he sees the ball early, because he sees the ball so early. I don't know what it is about lefties, Candy. They use a part of their brain that just picks the ball. I don't know if you know all the lefties that you've ever played. They just see the ball early.
And they always have that lovely forehand, don't they? I'm actually left-handed and played tennis right-handed, which I'm still very, very angry about. But what can you do? But it's a big advantage, isn't it? And it just seems like the left-handers just have something a bit magical about themselves.
They do. I mean, learning how to serve was hard, because he's had to serve. You know, he's right-handed. He throws right-handed. Teaching someone off the cuff, you know, and everybody played their part. But, you know, you're really trying to put that, elbow in not too close, and arms are a little bit skew with. And, you know, I think when he was very little, he just sort of says, well, why can't I do it right-handed? And we sort of said, well, you're young enough to really have a go. And I'm really glad that we persevered. You know, lose the forehand a little bit sometimes, because just a bit through coordination. But I saw James Trotman, you know, in the last year, really trying to work on the throwing mechanics. I was on the court at the NTC with Joe Salisbury, and Jack was on the next court working with a baseball coach, just to try and improve the basic mechanics and timing, and just trying to, you know, fire up, you know, aspects of that throwing chain that could be a little bit better. And when he serves well, I think when he serves his best, I think he's top 3 servers in the world. When he serves really well, I think probably there's quite a gap. Like a good serving day is a phenomenal serving day, and I think an off serving day is probably a bit lower than he'd like it. You know, you think back, like Sampras would have an amazing service day, and a bad serving day would be still pretty good.
Yes.
You know, and I think a lot of coaching is about, when you've got good players, their good days are great. You know, if you can just make their bad days still pretty good, you know, bring the bottom up, so the gap is pretty close. And I think that's where, Sinner on a good day is almost unplayable, and on a bad day, he's still incredibly difficult to beat.
That's what a lot of coaches on this podcast say, that when they've coached someone that's really, really, really good, that's the difference, is their best days are exceptional, but their worst days are still better than everyone else's because of the mentality, because they don't allow it to affect them, which is quite amazing, isn't it? It's not woe is me, I can't do anything today. It's just like, this is another day, I'm going to get through it.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't think I think there's room in that tennis market right now for guys that think like that. The guys that think, I don't care if I'm not having a good day, because I don't really want to call out any players, but there are some top players out there right now that you still think if they're a little bit wobbly, then there's an in.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen it in Yannick Sinner yet. I haven't seen it for a very long time. He seems to be the one that can pretty much robotic. He's very, very solid, mentally incredibly solid, as well as the rest of his game. But I think everyone else is sort of up for grabs.
I think you're right. And I think having met all these guys now through my work for the ATP, which I absolutely love, I think the thing that astounds me is what good humans they are, as you said. They're all so personable, so pleasant. And obviously, you don't sometimes see, do you, the inner workings when things go wrong behind the scenes. But on the whole, they're exceptional people who do exceptional things on the tennis court, which in my opinion is the hardest sport in the world. And it's easy to be a little biased, so I do admit that, but it is such a difficult sport and so hard to compete day in, day out as these top players do, that I just think, I'm in such admiration. I'd love to speak to you more about hedges, because I remember speaking to you on the ATP podcast a while ago, and there was a story in Florida about another hedge. So you've been in the hedge with Laura Slater and Joe Salisbury, but you seem a man of hedges.
Yeah. Well, there's I tell you what, I mean, the great story, I don't know if this is a different hedge story, Candy, but the story of when, like, coaching Joe Salisbury. So when you're trying to figure out whether you've actually got someone who's a little bit special, you're trying to get to know them in their moments where they don't know they're being observed. It might be, I remember years ago, it was a coach said to me, the great thing to do is to say, I'd like you to hit, I'm off now, but I'd like you to go off to the court and go and hit 50 serves. But I've got to go early. And the coach hung around and watched the player take the basket and went to the furthest court and practiced on their own, and wasn't sort of looking around for any sort of accolades. Oh, I'm practicing on my own. And that gave the coach like the reason to think, right, this kid's good. This kid wants it for himself. They want it for the right reason. Yeah. So I always had that a little bit with Joe, because, we knew between ourselves that he was super keen, really into it. And sometimes I'd get these reports from the national coaches sort of saying, we're just not sure about, does he really love it? And I always put that back on them. I thought, well, you obviously haven't bothered to get to know him. So the first thing I would, advise you to do is actually get to know him, because he knew everything there was about tennis. Big Federer fan. And he was playing a match once, and there was a hedge behind the court. And I could see his lips moving at the back of the court, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. And I was intrigued to what his self-talk was. And I saw this hedge behind the court, and I thought, if I got in that hedge, I can hear what Joe's saying to himself. So I did. I had to go down like a main road to then come at the hedge from the other side. And then when I was like a quarter of the way into the hedge, and I thought, this isn't one of those soft hedges. This is one of those ones that's really, really thick and horrible and nasty. But I was halfway in, and to get out, I would have caused a bit of a kerfuffle, because I think my tennis shirt had been tangled up, and I thought, I'm here now. And I sat near enough. And I promise you, it was one of the best moments, a bit like this coach had, when he saw his buddy serving at a distance and thought, this kid's doing it for himself. I heard Joe quietly saying to himself, come on, let's go. Come on, keep going. really that self-talk, that self-inner voice. And I got to hear it.
Yeah.
And then I know, and I've told Joe before, and I went, from that moment on, I sort of dedicated, I said, right, if you're in, I'm in. If you're committed, I'm committed. And I'll do everything I can to support you and help you. So that's that's my second hedge story for you, Candy. And and I definitely got a few scratches and scrapes, but it was blooming worth it, because we're here sort of. I've been working with Joe since he was 5 or 6 years old, and he's he's going to be, goodness me, he's a 1992 birthday, so 33. He'll be 33 next month. So poor boy, he'd have got less for murder, wouldn't he?
That's a great segue, actually, because Magdalenette, Mark Gellard, my co-presenter on this podcast, coaches Magdalenette, who's just turned 33. She's now won 3 WTA titles. And we did a First Strike seminar, which Mark hosts every year, with a lot of the coaching best talking. And she came on. So she and I did a 30-minute chat, and we were talking about her start. And her motivation essentially was to pay for all the bills for the family. And it seems like, to me, there's 2 kinds of tennis player. One that has the pressure, and a lot of females seem to come from that kind of place where the parents are very much depending on the money that they can bring in. And then you've got the other side where it's just intrinsically motivating for the player, like a Jack Draper, who was, I'm sure, comfortable. I don't know his beginnings, but I know of his parents, and I'm sure money wasn't a huge issue, nor the same for Joe Salisbury. But it does seem that there's 2 kinds of people. One, it's all about, how much they love the game because they're well supported behind. And then the other one who's really doing it because, well, the family's depending on them. Is there a third? Am I right? Or do you have another idea?
Well, but they're both connected by drive.
Yes.
Both connected by drive. Either it's an internal drive or an external drive. But they're both absolutely enormous drivers. So if you know that you're the chance to get your family, into a better position, and you love your family, then you'll do whatever it takes. In the same way that we would do whatever it took, for our children. It's such an internal drive, and something that you can't fail at. I mean, anything that you feel that you can't possibly fail at, you commit to totally and 100%. But I think the beautiful thing that I've experienced, and I know that, and I'm sure any coaches that have worked with players from a very young age, is that if you both find a connection and a drive and an ambition, it's so difficult to connect with people. It's so difficult to connect with relationships, wives, partners, girlfriends, to find someone that you're on the same page as. So imagine, imagine doing a job and you come across a kid that's so blooming hungry. And we're in a coaching world. I'm in a coaching world where, I'm fairly unusual in that I want to coach champions. I want to be around champions. And I think a lot of coaches, I do some coach education now, and all I try and do is inspire them to go, guys, you can blooming do it. You can blooming do it. And it's a bit like joining I need people to have like an SAS mentality. 99.9% of you need not apply, but those of you that do are going to go on an app that have the best journey you've ever had in your life. And if I can make that 99.9% just to make 95%, and we just try and get that number up a little bit to say it is doable, but it's blooming hard. And you've got to be blooming lucky to come across a kid in the first place that you're on the same page as. But if you as a coach, if you're not open to it, if you turn up every day and you do your job and you keep your head down and you just pay your bills, then you're going to miss the kid.
Yeah.
You're going to miss the next Jack Draper. You're going to miss the next Joe Salisbury. You're going to miss these kids that come in and go, hello.
Yeah.
Hello, tennis. Is anyone here for me? I don't want to do what everyone else does. I don't want to turn up once a week and have it part of my piano, ballet, tennis, my schedule. I want it to be my life. And if you're the coach that's going, well, I'm just doing my hours, I'm going to go home, feed the dog, sit in front of the telly, pay my, no. You need to have your head up, looking around your club. listening. Listen to the kid that knows every player's ranking. Listen to the chats that are happening in the as of the change room. They go, "Oh yeah, did you see Carlos? Did you see Jack?"
Totally.
That's the coach then goes over and goes, "Oh yeah, who do you play first round?" And when the kid answers and say, "Well, silly question, straight sets, 3-3," you go, "Hello, what you know," and then you put on a bit more for them, and then when you put more on for them, good stuff happens. And I think as a coaching fraternity, we need to work harder. Coaches need to work harder to look out for those players.
And it goes both ways, doesn't it? Where the coach misses the player, but then the player perhaps misses the coach and then loses interest. And maybe we lose a lot of potential brilliant tennis players because of that, because the coaches aren't looking at them the right way.
Yeah, they'll go off and do other stuff. They will go off and do something digital, or they'll go off and do something that inevitably they'll go and do something that they really, really enjoy and they get acknowledged for initially. Imagine if no one ever told Joe or Jack that they were good or they were doing a good job. I don't think they'd be here today. They'd turn up to their first mini tennis class, or, back in the day, probably wasn't too much mini tennis with Joe, yellow ball from 5 years old. And you have to have so much encouragement. Nikki would have encouraged Jack enormously. Roger and Ben, they've all been tennis family, Granny, Nanny, and then Nana Brenda, Grandpa Chris. They're all in there. They're all playing tennis, and they're, yes, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And then that, the young player starts to associate feeling good with tennis. So your first coach is blooming important. Your first tennis experiences are blooming important. So well done, Mum and Dad. Well done, Carolyn and Matthew. Well done for giving tennis to your kids. And then, hey, bring them to me. I'm ready. Let's go. Coaches like me are ready. We want families and kids that are committed and want to go on this wonderful journey. You don't always get it right, but as I say, I mean, I've had the pleasure. I can remember Jack's first lesson, and I can remember the last time I saw him compete, which was at Indian Wells beating Holger.
That's a long way, isn't it? A long story, a lot of effort, and it takes a village. And some of it is luck. We were actually speaking at a dinner last night because Andrew Garfield went to school with my younger brother, the Priory in Banstead. And he was a very small guy, didn't appear to be an actor particularly. But how you go from the Priory in Banstead and being a pretty bright kid to Spider-Man and making it in Hollywood and being a huge name, that takes obviously a lot of skill, but probably an awful lot of luck that he met the right people along the way. He got the opportunities. Someone gave him a chance. And I'd imagine that is the same with both Jack and with Joe.
Totally. Yeah. Single-mindedness. But if you've got a single mind, but you don't have an outlet, imagine if you had a single mind, no one to talk to, no one, it was just, just something that you felt passionately about in your head, and you're right. You no way to express it. I think nowadays it just puffs out and something else will come in. So that first connection is so blooming important, and having someone that you can really sort of trust and talk to. I remember taking Jack to Sweden for one of his first ITFs. He's number one, number two in the country, and we're in Sweden. It's blooming snow everywhere. And he plays the Russian number one. He's like 14. Timofey Skatov, who's out there in the qualies and working hard. Skatov, gave him a bit of a dusting. Actually, I think it was like 2-3 or 1-3, and it wasn't really close. And Jack had done his homework. Jack had found out that we're on the plane, and Jack's gone to me, well, this isn't going to work, is it? How's this going to work? I mean, Skatov's not going to school. He's working with all the adults and playing with all the pros at Moscow. How do I compete with that? I was like, well, you got to go to school, mate. You got to get an education. He goes, nah, I'm going to chat to my folks. I'm out of school. I'm going to go homeschool, I said, whoa. I said, how are you going to present that? He's like, yeah, well, I'll just tell him. I said, hold on, Billy. Let's be smart about this. I said, why don't you write them an email and express exactly how you feel? And he's like, Oh, go on then. So he had his laptop out. He was sitting in front of me in the plane for some reason, sitting in front, probably because he might have had a bust up or something. I don't know. No, but he starts writing this email. And he's pretty much like, dear mum and dad, Jack here, yeah, can't compete with these guys unless I'm going full time. I promise I'll still keep studying and doing my homework. I'll be a good boy. Lots of love, Jack. And I was like, and I went, I love it, mate. I love it. I love it. Your mum's going to need more than that. They're going to need more than that. Like, what, are you talking online school? Are you like, you're going to really work hard, really go for it, or, try and be a bit more convincing. So anyway, by the end of this flight, we had come up with a fairly well structured email, which pretty much said, look, hi, mum and dad, thanks so much for supporting me all this time. I feel it's time to move to the next level. I think I need to be homeschooled. I promise you I'll work hard. If I don't, then obviously, we can think again, but I want to play tennis full time. And I think, within a couple of weeks, this has been actioned, homeschooled, and, he's on that next step. So if I think back, I think, well, first of all, for Jack to have done his homework to find out what these other boys were doing, good on you, mate. Brilliant. And then to feel so deeply passionate and wounded to think, how can you expect me to compete if it's not a level playing field? This is not fair. So what have I got to do about it? Most kids would have gone, oh well, he's full time. I'm still at school. Oh well. He's gone, oh, I need to change that situation. So yeah, he's the one that drove it. And then I remember just trying to make it a little bit more user friendly for parents, a bit more digestible. As a parent myself, I thought probably needs to be a bit more convincing on the education and hard work front. And then then he left, and we spent quite a long time going up to Riverside Chiswick and working in with the JTC guys and hanging out with all the older guys, which is what he wanted.
Very cool.
Put himself in the right environment.
I actually spoke to João Fonseca's parents in Jeddah, the next gen, which he won at the end of 2024, took home $500,000 in prize money at the age of 18. And I was asking mum and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Fonseca, about his upbringing. And they said it was all him. He had an older brother. I think the older brother is into running. The second brother is into board sports. No tennis in the history of the family. But he started playing tennis and he wanted to play. And he was pushing them to do everything. And I think that is, well, I mean, it's a great story, isn't it? Because he wants it himself, Fonseca, and you could see how much he absolutely loves playing out there. And from what you've told me, it was the same with Jack. He'd just find a way.
100%. I think these guys are special. And like I said, I wonder how many players get missed. I wonder how many players get missed because either their parents don't listen to it or they simply can't afford it. There's not a local club, let alone a local coach. I mean, at least we're in Surrey, right? I mean, there's a lot of luck involved in Joe and Jack both being involved in Surrey. There's a lot of luck, if you like, in me being in my role as the performance manager to be able to have the time and to be on the books and to be paid for, to, especially with Joe, to better, get him involved in a lot of things because I could make those choices. I could, put them both into squads that ordinary coaches would have just ticked the box and gone, no, you're under 12. Jack was in our program at 10 or 11 years old. He was in with our 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And a lot of people said, what's he doing here? And I said, well, seeing as you said it first, go and play him first at 21. Go on. And then it became a joke. I mean, every week, he'd turn up the training and I go, so who wants it? Who wants it? And Jack would pretty much go, I'm down here if you need me, sort of thing. And everyone would just take one step back, and there would be one player that forgot to take one step back, and he'd be the one. He'd be the sort of the sacrificial lamb that would have to go down and be humiliated purely by a guy who wanted it more than them.
Yeah.
And that's it.
You said on the plane that sometimes you would sort of be apart because maybe you'd had a falling out with a few big bust-ups. Were you pretty tough on him? It sounds like you were on the practice court, but if he lost a match or had a bad attitude, were you tough on him? Were you kind of the guy that put your arm around his shoulders and console him?
Both ends of the scale, because when he fought hard, I'd give him the deepest hug and I'd just say, boy, am I so proud of you. You're an absolute monster. You're an absolute warrior. I mean, boy, oh boy, oh boy. But for sure, I mean, if he's not, not putting his shift in, not working hard. But now I look back and think, when you want to be great and you think that you can do something special and it's not working, then the intensity and the ferociousness of displeasure and frustration are beyond anything that we can possibly imagine. I mean, I can feel it sometimes if something isn't working or a squad isn't running properly. I can really feel agitated, really uncomfortable in my skin, and I got to sort this out because I really care deeply. And looking back, a lot of Jack's frustrations on a tennis court were because it wasn't going the way that he wanted it to go. And when I say wanted, I mean really wanted it to go. And that's what I heard about Roger Federer. That's what I heard about Novak. You can go onto YouTube and see clips of Federer like getting really, really stressed. And I just wonder with these guys, and Djokovic just getting so angry, and Andy just angsty all his career, and who knows, when you've got the rumblings of greatness and you just think that you're here for something greater and it's not going to plan, then it must feel horrible. It must feel like you just don't want to be there, and what, and you're too young to know what to do about it. You're too young to go, okay, let's take some deep breaths, go to the back of the court, look at my strings, visualize, take walk back slowly, few bounces. You only learn that stuff later.
Definitely.
Or you can learn it early, but you're probably doing it because it's easy to do it. I think if you're great and you're young, that's going to be hard to do because you're like, shut up, I want it now.
You're like a kettle.
Yeah, you're just gonna boil over. So yeah, and for sure, I mean, sometimes you're going to be saying, Jack, what are you doing? What are you doing, mate? Like, literally. But other times more times you're going, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible what you did out there. But yeah, every relationship has crosswords, and especially when they're young as well. Players are young, I'll be like, you're being rude now. You're being a bit rude. Like to any young player, I say, now you're being rude. Come back and talk to me when you can be polite, so because they're teenagers, right? You've got all this testosterone and you've got all this ambition. Oh, what a mixture.
Absolutely. And I've had you for an hour and 2 minutes now, Justin. Thank you so much for being generous of your time. I'd love to know, finally, if you have a funny story. If you went up to Jack right now, you're just sitting at a cafe and you wanted to make him laugh, is there anything that you would remind him of when you and he was younger?
Oh yeah, we were trailing through India. I had 4 young people with me. My priority was to keep them out of the doctor's surgery, out of the bathroom for most of those few weeks. That was my priority. So I had hand sanitizer before it was a thing, before COVID, face masks, and Jack's like teenager, sort of 15 years old. And the minute we arrived, I'm like, right, guys, sanitizer. He's like, oh, really? Proper Kevin moments, like proper, oh, no. If you're going to be like this for the next 3 weeks, and I said, I am. And if you hate me, you hate me. But I'd rather be basically, not standing outside a bathroom, making sure that you're okay and still alive and don't lose half your body weight. I'd rather be on you for all this time. And he worked so hard, and we didn't get him. He didn't get sick. He stuck to the same meal. Once we found a meal that he liked, drank properly, and for a bit of a nail nibbler, which he is, but, a couple of us are nail nibblers. It's the toughest thing, stop biting your nails, and here's sanitizer, all that sort of stuff. But the funny story was that he had, got to the end of the 3 weeks and he had done so well. He'd won an ITF. He was the youngest player. He got into the top 100, 6 months younger than Andy Murray did.
Wow.
At 15. Something that we're really after. But I want him to really go hard for one more match, and he was on his knees. and there was no physiotherapist, no massage. So I put a call in. There was at the club, there was like, it just said like, massage. And I was like, all right, it's the best we can do. So this guy turns up in a butcher's apron and he didn't really have anywhere to go. So we found at the club. I mean, it's pretty basic in India. And we found like a little room and there was like a table, just a table. So we put like a tablecloth on it. So it wasn't even a proper like cushion table, found a makeshift, a couple of sweatshirts under his head. And this guy started massaging him like he was an NFL linebacker. I was thinking more like a bit of a Swedish mass, bit of an FLR, just to spice up the muscles so he can go again tomorrow. And I mean, Jack was moaning. Jack was absolutely moaning. But also, when you're like moaning, laughing, and I was giggling too much and laughing too hard. And all the grief he'd given me about hand sanitizer, face masks, and I thought I'll let the suffering go on just a little bit longer, just for my own pleasure. And and then eventually he's like, just please get him to stop, please get him to stop. And I looked at the massage guy and went, just a little bit less. And when I did that, he thought I meant push down a little bit deeper. So for the next 30 seconds, he went proper deep shiatsu Thai massage. And I think Jack screams then just all right, that'll do. But he went out the next day, fresh as a daisy, and he smashed the guy up and he put it in. So it was worth it. But if I say to him, do you fancy a little massage in India again? He'll say, no, thanks.
I can't wait to interview Jack. I'm going to ask him about the butcher's apron and whether the chap brought a meat cleaver as well to the massage. That is a great way to end a fabulous interview. Thank you so much, Justin Sherring. It's been wonderful to have you on Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach.
Thank you, Candy. See you soon.
Thank you for watching Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Please like, subscribe and share, and we'll be back soon with another great episode.